Good afternoon, everyone. This is author R. Weir, Randy, as people like to call me, my birth name. I wanted to say hi, everyone out there. We've got another episode of Bringing Life to Characters, and we have a author I've known for a little while, not a ton, but we've met a few years back, and I'll introduce her in a minute. First thing I was going to talk about is be sure you check out my newest book, Murder by 100 Cuts. There's a cover on there. I hope you'll look into that. Dealing with the trial of the Front Range Butcher, my award-winning book. And he's back and on trial. And I had a lot of fun. Dealing with serial killers isn't always the funnest thing in the world, but I enjoyed writing that book and bringing him back and his evilness to bear where everyone could see him and put him on trial, and hopefully he gets his day in court and his comeuppance. But you'll have to read the book to find out. And I do suggest everyone read The Front Range Butcher as well first, since you can see where he came from, how he came to life, and his evil that he throws out there. So we're gonna start today. We've got an author there. She's a Colorado author as well, and she's written a whole lot of books and has been very successful, best-selling author. And we're going to bring her up now, Renée Pawlish.
Hello.
Hopefully I say your last name correctly. Pawlish, right? Pawlish?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yep. People butcher my name all the time, so I get Wire and Weir. Yeah. Weir is correct, but some people, Wire, Where, all that stuff. So I always have.
I got a lot of that growing up. Yep.
Yeah. Well, Renée, thanks for being on today. You're a Colorado author. I always like authors who live in Colorado. And I actually found your books years ago and downloaded several of them, read a few. I haven't had a chance. When you're an author, sometimes it's hard to read because you're always writing all the time. Yeah. Hopefully you're always writing all the time. But then you came by one of my tables down in Douglas County and introduced yourself, and you had a table down there. I don't remember. Were you selling your books then, or were you there for another reason?
I think it was
a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it was actually at a craft fair, I think.
Yeah.
And you were selling books and I was selling other stuff. But yeah, we got to talking there.
Yeah. And and I think you bought one of my books, if I remember right. But we've met at Readers Take Denver as well the previous year. This year I did not go, and you did, which I'm thankful after what happened there. This year that I didn't spend the exorbitant amount of money, because I think they raised the rates quite a bit and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, it was more expensive.
I've got one of Carter Novels Says Hello. Hi.
Hello.
How you doing out there? She's a lady that I was on one of her podcasts, lady and her husband.
Oh, nice.
Joan, and I'm blanking on the husband's name, but I'm sure she'll type in and let me know so I don't feel too stupid. But thanks for being on today and listening in. So Renée, tell us a little bit about yourself. You live in Colorado. I don't know if you've lived here all your life, and a little bit about yourself and what keeps you motivated in life.
Yeah, no, I've lived in Colorado most of my life. I was not born here. I now live southwest of Denver in the mountains, and I love it up here. And when I'm not writing, I'm hiking or riding my bike, things like that. And I had a career as a counselor a long time ago, worked with sexually abused teens, and I did DUI classes. And then I moved into the tech world and was a business analyst for years. And just a couple of years ago, I actually quit and write full time now. So that's nice to be able to just spend the bulk of my time creating characters and killing off characters and that kind of thing.
Yes, killing off characters. So I knew they would let me know. Rob and Joan, that's right. And they said hello back as well.
Hello.
So so living in Colorado, so you do a lot of those Colorado things, hike and bike. I mean, you're made for Colorado. That's what Coloradans like to do.
That's right. The mountains are beautiful. You got to take advantage of it. And I actually am lucky where I'm at the end of a road, and I can hike up the private road where no cars can go, and it's like my own private trail. So, and I do a lot of thinking and plotting as I'm on my hikes. So that's a great way to think through your novels.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's, you always had to have that inspiration. And a lot of your
Yeah.
novels, I know, Colorado is the backdrop of a lot of your novels, just like mine are as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I started writing, it's write what you know. So it was, let's place these characters in Denver. And I'm dating myself, but that was long enough ago that the internet was not the resource that it is today. Now, I've been able to, my Joe Gunning series, she's a kind of like a female Jack Reacher. I can place her all over the world, and you can just get on the internet and figure out a lot of things without actually having gone to those places. So that's been a neat thing to do, but it's also been fun to write about not only Colorado now, but I took my Reed Ferguson series and I branched off from that and created a character, a private eye in the 1950s in Denver. And that's been a lot of fun to try and use real historical places or people here in Denver from the 1950s. And it's been a lot of fun to learn more about Denver. And then I've even gone to some of the places that I researched first. And then I was like, oh, I should go there. And so that's been a lot of fun too.
Yeah, I'm always impressed. One of the authors I had on last time, Johnny Weber, she does historical fiction,
Uh-huh.
romance type stuff, going to Deadwood and building those period pieces and trying to make it factual for that timeline. And of course, the 50s is kind of the classic 40s and 50s. The detective noir novels from those days, Philip Marlowe and all of
Yeah.
those as well. So yeah, that's a great timeline to base those stories in.
It's been a lot of fun. I haven't written a Dewey Webb novel in several years, but I keep thinking at some point I need to go back to it, just because there is an awful lot to tap into, and it also makes it fun because you write so much in the present, and it's fun to write in the past where they don't have the internet and cell phones and things like that. So it forces you as an author to think through, how is this guy going to solve this crime without all of the things that we have available to us today.
Yeah, that's the footwork that's involved. They had to actually get out or go to libraries to research things and
Yeah.
all that. Yeah, now we just type it up on Google search and we can bring up
Yeah.
Google Maps and see a site and oh, this is a good location. I like this spot or whatever. Did you make any fictional? So in the 50s there, it's Denver, but did you have different? Did you make a fictional, I live in Westminster, so did you make any fictional part of it, or is it always just strictly just Denver?
No, I mean, I didn't.
The
I would
suburbs,
create.
we have all these suburbs, but I don't remember, is
Yeah.
Littleton and them have been around? Were they
No,
around in those
I
days?
tried to be faithful to stuff like that. I didn't make up towns, or maybe make up a street, or a place that he goes to eat or something like that. But where I could, I've even used real restaurants, real gyms, things like that were here in the 1950s. But yeah, like in one of the books, he talks about, I think, driving up north to the Fort Collins area, and I tried to keep it very true to, he didn't. It's not like now where it's practically all built up between the two. It was you kind of get out of Denver, and there really weren't a ton of suburbs, and then suddenly you're just in the plains until you got closer up to that area. So I try to keep it as faithful as possible.
Yeah, a lot of ranch land and farmland and stuff in those days.
Yes.
And of course, they got all
Yes.
bought up, and now it's all built up. And yeah, it used to
Yeah.
be big gaps between the cities, and now they've all grown together. Fort Collins and
Yes.
Loveland used to be fairly spread out, and now they've grown in where there's basically you're in Loveland, and bang, you're in and now you're in Fort Collins.
Yeah.
They've
It's
run right.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was Stapleton Airport around in the 50s? I can't remember how old Stapleton was. The original
Uh,
airport we had here.
that I don't know because I haven't had to use
Hadn't
it
used
in
the
a
airport in
novel.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember when that was built.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so how long
Yeah.
have you been writing?
I I first started dabbling in writing when I was like in fifth or sixth grade, and we had a family friend who uh, was a teacher's aide and had an English degree and taught herself a long time ago. So she read some of the stuff that I wrote, very much kind of a Hardy Boys type of thing. I was a tomboy. I didn't like Nancy Drew. I liked the Hardy Boys and Alfred Hitchcock and the Three Investigators and stuff like that. And so that's kind of how it was, you know, going. And I never did finish it, but then I took creative writing classes in college and like that in high school. And so I've been writing a long time. And then once I self-published a book, Nephilim, back before ebooks, and I sold 500 copies there. And then I started hearing people talking about this new ebook thing, and then jumped in there. And I guess in 2011, I'd had a few in my Reed Ferguson series, and so I published them as ebooks first, and then it's just gone from there.
So when was your first published book come out? When did it come out?
Nephilim came out in, I think, 2005, and it's a standalone mystery slash thriller, supernatural thriller. I had plans for it to be a trilogy, but my efforts have gone elsewhere. So right now it's just a standalone.
And then after that, was it the Reed Ferguson that was the next you did, or?
Yeah, I had actually written This Doesn't Happen in the Movies before Nephilim, and I came close a few times to getting itself, or getting an agent and possibly getting it published. And then I ended up that's the cover there. And then I ended up writing Nephilim, and then did a second Reed book, and then because I was working full time and efforts go elsewhere, so it wasn't until, like I said, around 2010, 2011, I was actually between jobs and started self-publishing, and then going, I think I can make some money at this. And so I started focusing on the Reed series as the one, that might be my bread and butter, and went from there. Whoops, I think we froze a little bit.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we both went out there. So, but yes, you said 2011 you were between jobs. I think we got about to that point when it about started to freeze.
Oh, yeah, no, that's when I decided that I could that I had something with the Reed Ferguson series. So I had this family friend read it and edit it, help me, make some tweaks to it, and then I, published it from there. And I think I'd already had book 2 done, and I tweaked a few things. Because one of the hooks with that series is that Reed he loves film noir and old detective fiction. And so each book, the title either is a pun off a film noir movie, or it has some kind of movie tie-in. And so then in each book, he mentions a particular film noir movie, and he'll reference it somehow that, this particular part of the case reminds him of this movie. And so there's always that tie-in. But I didn't originally have that idea. It came after the first book and some response to it. And then I tweaked the second book and then just took it from there.
And you've written a lot of the Reed Fergusons. You've got quite a few, don't you? You have some full novels, you have some short stories, and
it's up to, I think I just published book 23, I think. And then I've got 2 novellas and 5 short stories. And I'm slowing down a little bit on the production schedule of those. I'm not sure when another one will come out, but I still have people that are interested, and they still they fall in love with the characters. And so they still enjoy the characters. And so I'm sure there'll be more in the series. I don't know how many more, but there's Nero Wolfe, some of these old guys, they had 40, 50 books in the series.
Yeah.
So as long as the readers are wanting them, you can still write them.
Well, and if you have if the idea is like for me, for my Jarvis Man, I kind of retired him after book 8 for a little bit and started a new series. And then the new series, I'm going, okay, I think I found a good way to bring him back, because I had him kind of retire from the private eye world, opened a bar, and then COVID hits. And, bar owners, they struggled. So he kind of had to go back to be a private eye to help pay the bills for the bar and stuff. And then now I've written 2 books since then, and I've got a third one in mind. So yeah, there's that passion and inspiration still. Yeah, your readers always want you to have more books.
Yeah,
they always want you to write faster.
Yeah.
I have all the times where I wish you would write quicker, and I'm like, well, I mean, I could write crap a lot quicker, but
Yeah.
You don't want to read crap. You want to read a good book, and I got to feel the book to write it. So for you, I'm sure it's the same way. Yeah. You like the character you want to use, but there's got to be, a good storyline or good reason to keep him going.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And, I've got 4 series now. And last summer, I got the idea for a cozy mystery. I'm kind of keeping all of the premise and everything under wraps because it's a little bit different, but I've got book 1 finished on that, and I'm working on book 2 now, and I'll start releasing them in the fall. But there's you get fans, they like this series or they like that series and whatever, and so it's like you can't do everything for everybody. So
if we could clone ourselves, right? We have someone, we have 3 people writing in all 3 different rooms at the house. Yeah, everyone can work on a different story, but
exactly. Yeah. And no matter what people are saying about AI, it can't just spit out a great novel. So you can't do that either.
Yeah. I was reading something. Bernie Taupin, who's the writer for Elton John, lyricist for Elton John, he was talking about how he hates AI, and he says AI has no soul. And I really like that. It's technical and everything, but it has no soul. And as a person, as a writer, you're putting your heart and soul into that work you're doing, and AI doesn't have that capability. Maybe someday it will, when it takes over the planet and everything. But if you read enough sci-fi, but yeah, and I thought, oh yeah, that to me hits AI exactly. There is no soul, and it can't replicate what you as a writer does.
Yeah, well, and I don't want to delve too deeply into that world, because there's passions on both sides, but from what I've seen, at least of it can't. I think it can be helpful for authors, and there are tools and stuff like that, but it's just not you're not just gonna go, okay, Reed Ferguson is gonna do X, Y, and Z, now write me a novel, and it's just gonna write you a novel. It just doesn't do it like that. And so I think the people that are freaking out about it, it's like, you don't have to worry. It doesn't do that. So, it won't be a clone of us.
Yeah. That was a topic in one of my newsletters a couple of months back, and I told everyone that none of my books will ever be written by AI. I might use AI maybe for marketing, maybe. Because as an author, and I'm an independent author, but as an author, you always can use help with marketing, and I might use it for that. But for writing a story, no, I'm not even going to delve into that. And you mentioned you have an IT background, so do I. What was it you did in IT again?
I was a business analyst for several years in several different jobs. Yeah.
And did you enjoy that, or was it?
Not really. I mean, aspects of it. I'm more of a people person, so I enjoyed the personal connections that you make, and that kind of stuff. There were things I liked about it, but for a lot of jobs I've had, I might be there for 3 or 4 years, and I start to get bored with it, and I need to be able to start doing something different. And I think that's why I like the writing, is because even though, yes, you're writing a novel over and over and over again, it's different. It's different characters. It's a different plot, different settings. And so I think that always keeps it fresh for me and new and different.
Yeah, well, you hope it's a new setting, new plot, right? Try not to repeat yourself. You've written a lot of books. Do you ever find that you have to go back and look and go, gee, you said 20 plus Reed Ferguson's, is like, have I already covered this previously in a preview? Or do you have a pretty good memory that you remember everything you've written in those previous books?
No, I mean, I will go back and kind of read the blurbs or something and go, yeah, I did X, Y, and Z, and I need to do something different with that. And there, I think I read somewhere there's only, what is it, like 7 true plots there's only that you can do, or it might be 21. But I mean, the reality is there's only so many things you can do. It's, are you doing it in a different manner in this particular book, or with a different twist or something like that? And so that's, after, I mean, I think I've written 50 some books at this point. So it does get to be a challenge of how can I make this one different, which is partly why, with the Reed, it's I'm moving on to some other things, so that, like the Joe Gunning, that's a thriller series. So it's a completely different way of writing and plotting and that kind of thing. And so that's been nice to make something different like that.
Yeah, I know when I was doing my new book, Murder by 100 Cuts, I had to go back and read my Front Range Butcher again. So I wanted to keep consistency because I'm bringing back the same bad guy. Do you have bad guys that are in your series that have come back from book to book, or those antagonists that Reed or any of your other characters can't quite seem to get rid of?
I haven't done those in those series. In the Joe Gunning series, I've left some things open-ended to where some of the bad guys will definitely come back. I'm not exactly sure when. I actually think the next one, somebody's going to come back from book 2, and this will be book 7 that I'll be working on. But the other ones they tend to just be finished when they're finished, and those bad guys are done. So
Dead and Buried?
I've done those.
Dead and Buried. Phone was ringing there. Had to swipe my phone there. So, all right. So you said the Gunning, the Joe Gunning thrillers is, and you have, I believe, 5 books in this series right now. Is that correct?
I think there's 5, and book 6 will come out in July. It's all ready to go. Just, that's the timing of the marketing on it. So, that's the newest series. It's done really well for me, generally well received. You get some people, they're like, you can't copy Jack Reacher or whatever. And I'm like, not really copying him. It's just similar,
Well, she's female. So
yeah,
I'm assuming she's not 6'4" and 250 or whatever Jack Reacher is, right? I mean, that would be definitely a copy.
Like he came back and is a fish out of water. She comes back from her military service, or she was in civil affairs, and there was some bad stuff that happened on the last mission that she was on, and so she's out of the military, but rootless at that point. Now, where I'm veered off some from Reacher is that her family does come back into it in book 4, and you get some of that connection a little bit. Whereas Reacher, I think, I'm not fully caught up on the series, but I think it's a long time before you ever really get to know the brother, and I think it's in some flashbacks or something, and so he doesn't have a family connection where Joe does. But I've tried to stay somewhat faithful in that she was wandering around the country, and that or she even goes to Mexico, and then something happens there, and that's the similarity.
Yeah, and we all have my Divine Devils series is a little bit similar. Hunter Divine, he's a former U.S. Marshal, and he does a little. He's not really roaming, but he's down on his luck after he loses his job and gets hired in the first book. Kind of gets him out of the gutter and stuff. So a little bit of that, and then he kind of ends back there by the 4th book, and with a big conclusion and all that. So Yeah, I mean,
Uh-huh.
those tropes are all there, and we all grab them. We all try to spin them a little differently and in different ways. And I like the idea of a badass female character too, especially a lead character.
Mhm.
What is it? Renee Ballard, I think it is the new Michael Connolly. She's a
Yeah.
cold case cop in his series, and they're going to do, of course, all of his stuff gets turned into TV series, and they're
Yeah.
going to do a TV series now with her as well. Bringing that back, and there'll be some crossover with Bosch, the
Yeah.
way it sounds. So yeah, those types of character, okay, those types of characters are great, and I don't think people are tired of those characters yet. Obviously, Lee
Mhm.
Child has now turned the books over to his brother, who's
Right.
taken over the series. They kind of co-wrote several of them,
Yeah.
and most of those are pretty much standalones. There isn't really too much
Right.
carryover between books. Is that true of the Joe Gunning series? You said there's a bad guy that may come back, so there may be a little bit of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, they do. I mean, they end, I think, with no cliffhangers, anything like that. It's just that, as in real life, some people get away, or or they're awaiting trial or that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
so, I didn't want everything always tied up in a neat bow, so that there are people that can come back, situations, um, so that it puts her in peril, quite frankly. um, and I just thought that was a good way to go with some of that. And like I said, there's some where I'm like, I've kind of got it in the back of my head that this character should come back, but I don't know when yet. I haven't plotted that far into the future to know. So, um, but it's fun. I think it keeps her interesting, and she is a badass.
Well, of course. Yeah.
Yeah,
Got to be.
yeah,
And even Reacher takes his lumps, and I'm sure she takes her lumps too. I mean,
yeah,
they're
yeah.
not invincible. They're not
No,
robots.
and I think that's the thing. One of the criticisms I've heard about men writing female characters is they tend to write, you know, their image of what a woman should be or whatever, and they tend to leave or miss the mark when it comes to sometimes how a woman thinks, or her emotional part of some of that.
Mhm.
And so that is one piece with Joe that I've tried to keep in there is, she does have that softer side. And sometimes it can be a struggle too of, you want to, you have to do something, and yet you don't really want to do that, and I try to put some of that piece in there too. Some of her struggles with her dad, some of her struggles with her sister. And I don't think you get some of that with Reacher. I mean, yes, he'll take his lumps, but he doesn't, I think there's an emotional side to him that sometimes isn't there, right?
He is somewhat robotic sometimes.
Yeah, yeah,
He's and you get a little bit, and they did the Amazon series, and maybe they reveal a little bit more. But I've often said that Reacher, he's somewhat psychotic too. I mean,
yeah.
he
No, the
doesn't
reality,
seem
yeah,
he doesn't seem to it doesn't seem to bother him to hurt people. There's a little bit of that in the books.
yeah,
You read that in the books, but on the series, it's just like, I just broke this guy's leg into like 16 different places, and okay, no big deal.
yeah,
He's
right.
totally fine with it.
Yeah, yeah, and that was a piece with Joe where it was like, I want her to struggle some with some of those types of things. I mean, you can still put her in those situations, and let's face it, I mean, the reality is you're suspending some belief in order to go into these worlds, because these people this stuff isn't gonna happen all the time. But when it does, I didn't want her to, I like your word robotic. I didn't want her to just be robotic and just be like, oh, this happened and this person died and whatever, and I just move on. I think it makes her more real and more relatable to go, okay, she feels some of this, even if there's nothing she can do about it, or even if she doesn't feel it for very long, but at least acknowledge that that's there.
Yeah, and yeah, that's good. And I've often wondered, it's like I have some strong female characters in some of my books. Divine Devils, Athena Nasso's in it, and she's one of the Divine Devils, the team that Hunter runs, and she's tough. And it is always interesting for a man to write a woman, and of course, a woman writing a man. I guess it could be a similar thing, but I've
Yeah,
always wondered, it's like, would I be able to write um, a main character as a female being a man? I probably could. I haven't got the right
yeah,
idea if I'm going to do it someday.
yeah,
But some people, it's just like with people mentioned too, Hunter Divine, he's a black character, and I'm obviously a white man, and people says, did you find that difficult to write about a black character? And I says, not really. I did research and I put myself in a frame of mind and what he goes through being a black man and in this country and stuff. So, I try to emulate some of that, but obviously I can't completely feel exactly like a black person
right,
because I'm not a black person. I'm a white person, and I may be treated differently in
yeah,
some ways. It goes back to the old Saturday Night Live. I remember Eddie Murphy they did a little thing, and he painted himself white. He looked like a white guy, and he's wandering around, and he found out, wow, I can't believe how much differently I'm treated in the world because now I'm a white man, as opposed to being a black man. It was really
yeah,
funny. It was poking fun at it, but it made you understand a little bit. Yeah, it could be different because people were just giving him money and things like. It's just a totally different world for him and
yeah,
stuff. So yeah,
yeah,
you can't always emulate it completely if you're not that type of person, but we can
yeah.
get close.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure I have had some criticism of, writing Reed or writing Dewey, and some of it's deserved. I'll admit it, and I've tried to be more cognizant about that type of thing. I've even gone to some male friends and gone, if he reacted X, Y, or Z, does that make sense? Am I missing something or whatever? Because I'm not a man, right? Just
Right.
like you said, you're not a black man, that type of thing, so, but I think those stretch us too as an author, as a writer, to do those kinds of things. And I think it makes it, for me anyway, it makes it fun, to dabble with different characters and, um, you know, it just is it makes you look at things differently and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, and it is fiction. It isn't.
Yeah,
It's not a
yeah,
biography or anything. It's a fictional thing. So obviously, we're taking some things to extremes in our stories as well.
right.
But yes, you do want to at least put an element of realism in there.
Right.
Obviously, same thing with Jack Reacher. You know how he's always just busting everybody up and this and that, and like it's no big deal. And it's like, wow, is there really a person in this world that's like that? If they are, they're usually probably in jail.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what authors did you read? What authors inspired you? You're in that noir detective thriller genre, so I'm sure you
Yeah.
probably have a lot of those that you read maybe when you were younger, and you go, "Wow, I could write a story like that." And go
Yeah.
from there.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I always liked the Hardy Boys when I was a little
Mhm.
kid. Um, I liked Nero Wolfe, the Rex Stout's Nero Wolfe, and I liked his sidekick Archie. That's everything's told from Archie's perspective, and I liked that he was kind of a smartass. It sort of fits with my sense of humor and stuff. But early on, like when I was trying to write Michael Connolly, Lee Child, GM Ford, Harlan Coben, these guys were all um, early on, Sue Grafton, and all of those people, I met them at a bookstore. A lot of them I met at Murder by the Book when it was still open, and I sat with them and chatted with them about writing and stuff because they were early enough in their careers that people didn't know them really well. And
Mhm.
I mean, I had conversations with Michael Connolly, not long ones. He's kind of quiet, but
Yeah.
so a lot of those were inspirations for me. And when I when I sat down to write the first Reed Ferguson, I was trying to come up with something. I knew I wanted a PI because I read a lot of those types of stories, but I wanted something that was a little bit different. And at that time, anyway, you rarely saw a PI book where they were on their first case. Normally it's first book, but they're a seasoned PI. And so that's what I did. Was we come into Reed's world. It is his very first case as a private investigator. And so that was one piece that I tried to do as a little bit of a hook. And then if you read them, I think they're good PI stories, but they have, their next door neighbors are a little goofy. He calls them the Goofball Brothers. And, so there are humorous elements in it as well. And that's kind of what I went with. But yeah, there's those authors. I'm sure there's other ones that I'm forgetting, but, I read a ton. And it was mostly mysteries. And I think you just sort of absorb all that in. And when it came time to write something, it was like, well, this is my genre. This is what I read all the time.
Right.
And so this is what I need to write.
Yeah, that was the stuff I read. I read Robert Ludlum. I read the Bourne series, Ian Fleming, all the James Bond.
Yeah.
Huge Robert B. Parker fan. The Spencer series was probably the book series that I have, and you can't see you probably could see my bookshelf a little bit in the background here.
Yeah.
I've got Lee Child, but I've got every Spencer book. And of course, Robert passed away in 1980, and Ace Atkins took over for him, and he did a pretty good job. He's not doing it anymore. They've gone to I always blank on his name, but he's a sports writer, but he's taken over that, and he brought back Sonny Randall as well. But you're talking about didn't talk very much, authors. It's always interesting interview, because I've heard some Robert B. Parker interviews, and he's a very withdrawn, and that's just authors in general. You can ask him questions, but the answers a lot of times are very short, and they're just not big into that type of stuff. Right.
Yeah, they say that a lot. The authors are introverted, and they did just be in their little world, and that I'm an extrovert, and
you're the opposite, huh?
Yeah, I'm the opposite. Yeah, but I still I don't know. I think I've always liked to write. I've been good at it, and then, like I said, I love to read, and so it just it hasn't been overly difficult for me to do this. Yes, you have to learn your craft, and you get better as you go. I'm still learning things, but I've talked to people where they're like, it's a grind to put out a book. And I'm like, that's just not me. Fortunately.
Yeah. You're lucky. Well, and people have asked me that before, and asked you the same question. Do you ever get writer's block? Do you ever run into situations where it's like, it just ain't there? And
I really haven't. Earlier on when I first started this, it was more not having the time, because you're working a day job. You have to do this on the evenings and the weekends. And it was more when I two things really helped me. Was one, when I remember people talking about, you have to outline, you have to know your book, you have to outline. And that's never been me. I've been a pantser. And I just went with that and ignored that advice. And then I read a book by a lady who was the first one to say, there's a difference. You can pants it, you can plot it. Either way works. Just these are the downfalls of each one. And a light bulb went off, and it was like, oh, that makes so much sense to me. And that helped. And then the other thing, it was actually Janet Ivanovich. I've met her a few times, and she talked about, everybody says, oh, I've got an idea for a novel. Almost everybody never writes it. And she's like, if you just sit down and you write 1,000 words a day, at the end of the year, even with some time off, you're going to have 300,000 words. And, that for me then was, okay, you can start setting some goals to get stuff done. And, when I was working, it might not be a chapter a day. It might have been a little bit less, now, or even when I was still writing, I got into a mode where I just do a chapter would do a chapter a day and maybe take Sundays off, but that way you're continuing to produce stuff. And if you stay on some kind of schedule like that, you're obviously going to get more words out there and more books out there, and that's it is a business. That's how you make your money.
Yeah, well, and that's great. You're that disciplined when it comes to writing like that. I'm one of those. And I'm a pantser almost all the way too. I do a little bit of stuff in advance, but I always start with a basic idea, and I let my characters write the story for me a lot of times too.
Yeah.
So we've had that conversation with some other authors too about the characters are in your head, and they're almost like in a movie set. They're going, well, my character doesn't have a big enough part. I need a bigger part. I sometimes get that in my ear from my characters, which makes people think how psychotic I might actually be.
Yeah.
But I just sit there and I'm very much a streak writer. I can write 50,000 words just like bang, and then I'll stop.
Yeah.
And I'll kind of regroup, and I might go back and reread what to take a break for a while, and then I'll pick it right up again and keep going and that. So I'm not quite as disciplined as you are, but I know when I'm a very streaky. So I know when I'm on that roll, I'm like, yep. Or I know I'm like, yep, I really need to get this done.
Yeah.
Enough throwing around. Get that. It's there. It's in your head. Sometimes it's just a matter of me just getting on the keyboard and starting to type, and then it just rolls. But sometimes I get a little bit lazy occasionally from there. But I've had two books a year for the last couple of years. And my books have been running 140,000 words or 150,000 words. So they're big books. So
yeah. Well, yeah. And I mean, I think for myself too, I get where, you'll get a streak where it's just really flowing and it goes better. And then I've had times, where it's like, man alive, I can't see the ending of this, or I can't figure this chapter out. But usually I'm on deadlines, either because I have pre-orders up or something like that. So it forces you to finish, to keep going. And what I don't know, I've just, over the last probably 4 or 5 years, I've just kind of figured out what works for me. And I'll finish a book and typically take a week or so off from the writing of it, to just give myself a break and then move on to something else. Or, this last spring, I pushed really hard to get 3 books done, but then I took almost a month off and went to Australia, and I came back, and I've been easing back into it, but it's because I had planned ahead and had that time. But I'm amazed at what's her Amanda Lee, she cranks out books left and right, and her writing schedule's insane. And I look at that and go, I wish I could do that, because you get 100 books out there, 200 books out there, think about the kind of money she must be making, and people like her books. It's not like she's putting out crap either, but I'm like, I can't do that. I can't, I think she writes 3 chapters a day, and every once in a while I've done that because of a tight deadline, but I can't do it for very long.
Yeah. I agree with you. At least for me, being independent, I can go by my own schedule. Yeah. Everybody wants me to write books faster, but I'm like, no, I'll write it at my pace. And
right.
For me, it's kind of, I have to feel that inspiration to write to. And sometimes my brain's tired, and sometimes I take a break, and I do have house things I have to do as well. I'm mostly retired these days, but I do a little bit of work occasionally, but I can kind of pick and choose it. But mostly I could sit and write all day long if I really wanted to.
Right. Yeah, no, I admire people that can do that, but my brain just gets tired. Like I said, sometimes I can do, if I've been on deadlines, I can do a chapter in the morning and take a break, and then do a chapter in the afternoon and produce more that way. But I don't like to do that. I'd rather just be able to do 1 chapter a day and then spend the rest of the time, doing the marketing and answering emails and those other kind of things. And it gives that creative part of my mind a break. And, the more I'm doing this and the more successful I'm getting, I am trying to slow down some of that writing and that kind of thing. Because the other thing is you inadvertently, you can train readers then to expect a book every other month or something. And then when you want to be like, no, I don't want to do that, then they're like, where's the next book? Where's the next book? You know?
That's good and bad, right? At least
Yeah.
long as they're itching to get your books, that's always it's a good thing. So are you independent or are you a public? Are you
I'm fully independent.
you
Yeah.
are totally independent.
Yeah. I tried to get agents a long time ago, and I came really close a couple times, which is, it told me that my writing was then, quote unquote, like good enough. You know, I knew I had something there. And then just, I, tried with Nephilim and then went on and, at this point, I don't see any need to go with an agent, because unless you've written, The Girl in the Window, or, or The Woman in the Window, whatever, some of these, Gone Girl or something, you're not going to get a big contract anyway. And I can do better independently than I can with an agent. So I'm happy doing it this way. I mean, and there's work, there's a lot of stuff you've got to do on the side that maybe a publisher would take care of, but that's okay.
So who does your covers?
I have some different people doing it. I have a guy named Stephen Novak who's done the Sarah and the Dewey and the Reed books. I hired Demonza to do the Joe Gunning, and they're good. They're expensive, but they're good. And I think they've really. I wanted to just really do well with that series. And then there's another guy who's independent. I can't think of his name, but he's doing the covers for this new series. They're working for now. I think the nice thing too about being independent is you can test your covers and whatnot, and you can be like, gosh, this just isn't speaking to the readers anymore. It's not grabbing their attention, and switch covers. And that is one area that I think independent authors do a much better job than publishers at getting good covers out there that speak to the readers. And we're in control of that, as well as our blurbs. And, you can test things and you can switch on the fly and do something that works better.
And so when you when you have a cover, do you have an idea what you think the cover is going to be, and you kind of give that to your designer, and they kind of run with it, or how does that usually work for you?
Yeah, there's usually some input from me. Stephen came up with kind of the concept of the title, and you can see kind of the title in the shadows in the background. He came up with that. And now, it's branded. And so I can just go to him and say, the book is about this, like the latest one, it was, I think could you have a small safe in there and whatever. And then he'll come up with something. And, that sometimes you hit it great. Other times it's like, no, we need to tweak this a little bit, or that's not what I was thinking of. But part of what you're paying them for is for their creativity and expertise too. So, but yeah, I tend to guide them a little bit and give them an idea of what I'm looking for, and then they go from there.
Yeah, that's with my cover artist. I give her a basic idea and stuff. I've got some on the wall over here. My daughter will even draw something sometimes and send it to her, but she just runs with it and goes from there. But usually when I start a book, sometimes I don't always have a cover in mind right off the bat. And,
right.
And my early covers, sometimes I got too much in my early covers, and
yes,
it needs to be a little more simplistic. And I've kind of learned you can't put the whole book into a cover.
Well, no, it's a great point. And I think authors have had to learn that over time. And it is a beginning author thing where they think, I need all this different stuff in there. And then you realize, no, you really don't. And even it's things like, in one of my covers, recent ones, I was like, it's a back porch. And I was like, well, the background of that, there isn't a wood fence and whatever. And then I was like, it really doesn't matter. every once in a while you're going to get a reader email you and be like, the cover didn't have this or da da da. I've had that here and there, but it's rare enough. As long as you're getting the main feel of what the book is about, that's all you need.
Yeah, you want something that's going to grab them, hopefully. And of course, you've got a built-in audience, so they're probably just like, it's Reed Ferguson, I'm going to read it, or Joe Gunning, I'm going to read it, right? Who cares what the cover looks like?
Yeah. But it's all those other readers, you got to think about
other readers, and usually the title is a big grabber too. That's always you're always looking for that title. And I've had some books where I know I made a list early on. I think I had like 7 different titles I kind of had written down as possibly before I finally settled on the final title and stuff.
Yeah.
And so like your Gunning series, you've got that the gunning is in each of the titles, isn't it? Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. I did that with that series. The Sarah Spillman, she's a female homicide detective. So that's a police procedural series. I did Deadly with those. So Deadly Connections, Deadly. Yeah. That one. This new series, I toyed around with having the character's name in every title, but there's a series written a long time ago that did that. So I was like, no, I won't do that. And so I think those are going to just be whatever seems to fit with the novel. But, there's good and bad to like doing the gunning or the deadly this, because, then you're always stuck with something that seems to make sense with it. But I started with the gunning series. I've got a document that just has a whole bunch of titles in it to choose from. Right. And I probably will stop writing the series before I run out of title ideas. But yeah.
Yes, I'm working on a new series too, and it's got one main word, and I've already written out several titles as well, which is something I can't really talk about yet as well. But it's one of those that the same thing where, I've kind of already got the titles, even though I don't necessarily have the stories, but these titles all sound like they would work and I could use them. So that's good. So
yeah, you just pick the one then that works best with the plot of the story. So,
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So we're coming up on 50 minutes. I don't remember how much time you had. I usually go about an hour, but sometimes we've gone longer. So if you got a hard stop, let me know.
No, I don't. So we're good.
We can keep going. Okay. Yeah. Always fun. I always enjoy talking. So where do your book ideas come from? Are they kind of out there in space somewhere and you're just grabbing them? Or do you make little notations when an idea? I remember an episode of Seinfeld where he woke up in the middle of the night and he had this joke and he thought it was so funny and he wrote it down. And the next morning he wakes up and he looks at it and goes, "That's not funny. That's not funny." That was a good joke.
Yeah. No, it depends. I mean, there's a local author here. He's not writing anymore. His name's Stephen White. And he talked about he would get a lot of stuff out of just reading newspaper articles or things. Mm-hmm. And so I'll see something like that, or I'll read a book and go, I like the way they did this, but I could do this, or something. And some of the reads have come out of, as I'm trying to kind of go, what title might I use, that I could pun something. I have a whole list there of punned titles as well. And I'll read through those movie plots and go, okay, I could do this that then sort of ties in with the movie. And that's how they'll have that connection and, something like that. But because again, I'm not a plotter, I'm a pantser. I don't outline most of the time. I usually just need that kernel of an idea to start with this and then continue going from there. And what I've noticed over the last probably 4 or 5 years of writing is that I will start out pantsing it, got my premise, I start going with there and I'll start thinking through, this will happen in the next chapter and then this. And it's usually about halfway through the novel, that at that point I can basically outline to the end. Maybe not every detail, but I know, okay, he's got to talk to this person, and then this clue has to be discovered, and then this has to happen. And I can plot through to the end at that point, at least the basic details of the story. But ideas can come from anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Always things popping into my head. Sometimes I write them down, sometimes I don't.
Yeah.
And then later on, I'm going, dang it, I wish I wrote that down. Now I can't remember.
Oh, I do that all the time. Yeah. Yeah. I'll think of things right before I fall asleep. And then I wake up and go, what was that again? It sounded really good.
Well, and usually whatever book I'm working on, the next chapter sometimes are always rolling through my head before I go to sleep. And sometimes I have to get up and write them.
Yeah.
If I'm not too tired, but sometimes I'll get up and write them and then come back to bed and then it's out of my head. But it always seems like there's the next steps are always rolling through my head. And do you write? We were talking about writing earlier. Have you been writing? Do you usually write more than one book at one time? And do you always write in order from beginning to end? Or do you sometimes write your ending before you get through the middle or whatever?
Right. Yeah. I typically I'll write one book at a time. I'm toying around here this summer of trying to write 2 books in 2 different series, like do one chapter of one in the morning and the next book in the afternoon. I don't know if that'll end up working or not, or if it'll feel like they bleed into each other. But so far it's just been, one book start to finish. And most of the time it's very sequential. Every once in a while I'll have a scene or something that I know needs to be in there, and I'll go on ahead and write it and then just hold on to it until it's time to insert it. And I usually don't know the ending when I start a book. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I might know, this is the how, they're murder mysteries, so you have to know some of it that you're plotting towards.
Right.
But I've had novels where I was like, okay, and this person could be the one that kills them and whatever. And then partway through the book, I go, nope, I'm going to make them a red herring, and it's going to be another person that does it.
Yeah. And that's the evolution of a pantster. I was on a panel. We were talking about that, and the guy next to me, he was a plotter and I'm a pantster. And I told him, well, it's probably easier for you being a plotter than for me for a pantster. He goes, not necessarily. He says, because sometimes he's so rigid that I've already rigidly written everything out. I don't have any flexibility, where you have that flexibility as a pantster to change and make as I often say, left turn. Maybe it's a left turn, but no, maybe I'm now going to go right instead.
Right.
So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that, again, there's pros and cons to both, because that person who outlines, they can make that change if they want to, but they know that they've got to figure out the rest of the outline based on
the
that.
Domino effect. Yeah. So it's like all that, everything else may change.
Right, exactly. But, a pantser, then that's where sometimes you might have more editing to do, because you're, flying along and then you realize this would be great, but that means you got to change this earlier on or something. I had one story in particular where I think I got about 10,000 words in, it was probably 5 or 6 chapters. And I was like, what, I was heading in this direction. This makes more sense over here. And I didn't have to throw out those words, but I did have to go back through starting in chapter 1 and tweak some things all the way through to get it to work. And I think it made for a better story, but it was one of those things where I didn't think about it. It happened as I was writing, and you went, oh, this is pretty cool. This would make sense, but it cost me some time.
Right. Well, it's kind of like real life. We think what's going to happen tomorrow is what's going to happen, and things come up and change. And for me, at least for writing, I can't be that rigid. I've never been that rigid in my life. I don't usually. It's like vacations. I mean, we do plan somewhat of our vacations, but I'm kind of a seat of the pants kind of guy. My wife,
Yeah.
she's more of a plan things out type of person,
Yeah.
and I kind of like to go with the flow, as they like to say, and I do that with my writing. And yeah,
Yeah.
and there's good and bad with it as well. I mean, I wish sometimes I wish I did plot a little bit more in advance, but it's not nearly as much fun sometimes either.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Well, I saw Elmore Leonard. I think he was the keynote speaker at BoucherCon and was being interviewed, and he talked about how the characters he let them go,
Yeah,
and I thought, wow, that would be really interesting, and to just completely let it go and see where it would go. I don't think I'm that fast and loose with the characters, but there's definitely a lot of leeway.
yeah. A lot of times my characters are that way with me, and so it's. Like I said, they speak to me sometimes and go, "Hey, I need a bigger part," or
Yeah.
"I
That's
want to be
funny.
the bad guy. Why am I the good guy?" and stuff like that. So, but yeah, you always want to have those red herrings sometimes, and sometimes it's fun, and sometimes it can be a little bit frustrating. And yes, I do have to go back from time to time and fix a few things. I go back, and I have a tendency to honestly read. Like I said, I'm a streak writer, and I'll write a whole bunch of stuff, and then I'll have to stop for a little while. And I usually have to go back and reread what I wrote, because sometimes because you start typing, and then sometimes you go back and read. You go, what the heck was I saying there? Sometimes,
Yeah.
sometimes my fingers are faster than my brain works. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so are any of your characters based on real people or even based on real events? You said you went back to the 50s and you try to make that somewhat
Yeah.
realistic.
Yeah. No, I think there's parts of me in all the characters. I think I don't, in some ways, know how an author cannot have themselves, at least some aspects of their personality or something in their characters. I don't, there's a few characters here and there that are loosely based on some people or parts of their personality or something. But I've never like really hardcore went, character so and so is this person, just with a name change and a few other things or something like that. And with the Dewey, I've tried to bring in some real events that have happened, or allude to some real events or that kind of thing. I Denver back in the 30s had some activity, the KKK and stuff like that, and I alluded to some of that in one of the stories. And I haven't yet come up with any particular event that happened in the 50s that I could completely wrap a story around. But if I do come up with something, I think it's fun to intersperse, the real activity or the real events that happened with a fictional story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and are your stories? I was trying to remember Reed Ferguson. It's been a while since I've read the Reed Ferguson. He's done in the classic first person
Yeah,
style. Is that correct?
he is. Yeah.
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 So the private eye through his eyes. That's all that.
Right.
How are your other books? Are they? Do you have a mixture of third and first, or?
They're all first person except for the Joe Gunning. I went third person, and this new series is third person, just to try and do something a little bit different. Although the Sarah Spillman, there will be chapters from the killer's perspective.
Right.
And that was kind of fun to then go into that third person narrative for those parts of it. And when I started out with the reads, it just seemed natural to do it from his voice, his viewpoint. But it does limit you, and way back in the day, I mean, it was, you didn't break that narrative. Now they do it all the time. But back then it was, if you're writing in first person, you stay in that person's perspective. I don't worry about that so much now, because again, people don't care if you switch and go to another person's viewpoint. the fun thing about the third person perspective is you can bring in other characters and viewpoints into it, all to, dribble out what the reader needs to know, and hopefully engaged and excited to keep turning pages.
Yeah, I think the classic PI works great from the first person. And I've always done that, but I do have a little bit of, like, in my serial killer book, I do have some third person chapters where it's from the serial killer's point of view, more or less.
Yeah.
In that. The Divine Devil series, I did third person because I had so many characters in that book that I felt like I had to do third person. I wanted to see not only from Hunter's point of view, but from everybody else's, including the bad guys' points of views. And of course, like you said, like the Reacher books, some of his books are first person and some are third person. And Michael Connelly, like the Lincoln Lawyer series, he goes back and forth. When it's from the Lincoln Lawyers, from Mickey Haller's point of view, it's first person. But when Bosch is in most of those books, it's in from third person, the way the Bosch books are written. So yeah. So now it's not as big a deal as it used to be, I think. Of course, he's a big name author, so he can do whatever the heck he wants.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But sometimes it gets a little confusing. I know for me, and I always feel like he puts Bosch in there because he feels like Mickey needs that extra person in there. And I actually find, for me, the Lincoln Lawyer series for me is better. Bosch sometimes is a little too grim for me.
Yeah.
He opens up when he's around his daughter and stuff, but he's so, sometimes he's going to do it his way and he doesn't care and all that. And
right.
Lincoln Lawyer is a little bit like that, and he bends the rules too, but he's a little more fun loving and as well. So
I thought it was a refreshing change from Bosch when he introduced Mickey Haller. So, but I would imagine he probably got, like a lot of us, if you're writing so many in that series, what do you do to keep it new and fresh and interesting? And sometimes the best way to do that is to just go with a whole new series and then come back to it.
Yeah, and I haven't read any of the Renee Ballard stuff, and I know Bosch shows up in a lot of those too. So I'm assuming he does that. I'm assuming his publisher doesn't say, "Hey, you got to throw Bosch in there," especially at first, so to bring the characters over. I'm sure I would think they'd be strong enough to carry their own, but all the worlds intermix, and my books intermix. Do your worlds intermix in your books at all? Obviously, you can't mix Reed Ferguson with Dewey because of different timelines. But
right. No, I actually, so back, even before I wrote the first Reed book, I wrote 3 short stories with this character, Sarah Spillman, the homicide detective. And I had them published for a while, and I pulled them off Amazon, and I think I'm going to do a little bit of tweaking with them and then put them up as a reader magnet if you sign up for my list, some exclusive content. But so I had her character somewhat developed and out there, and then I started the Reed series, and it was book 4 that I had been hearing. It was independent authors were really, I think, the ones that were going, I can take characters from different series and cross them over, and then you hopefully get people wanting to read both series. And so I started putting Sarah in the Reed books. But it's all from his perspective, right? Is how he sees her and interacts with her. And then I finally decided, I had enough people say they liked her. Why don't I do her own series? And so I did. And it was interesting to then have her from her perspective of who she is and whatnot. And then I did one book where from her perspective, or it's a novella, Deadly Christmas, where she interacts with Reed, but it's then from her perspective of how she's seeing him. And that was kind of fun to do because typically up to that point, it was always, if they were running into each other, it's how Reed perceives her.
Right.
So that was fun, but I don't have, this new series then, and like either with Joe or the new character coming out, there would not be a way for them to interact with that. So at this point, they would just all remain in their separate worlds.
Did Reed and her get along, or was there clashing going on between, usually the private eye and the cop, they don't usually always see eye to eye,
Yeah, it's kind of that way. And Sarah's more, obviously she has to be by the book, and, she's pretty straightforward, and, it's kind of one of those things where she has a begrudging respect for Reed and what he does. And there's some humor there where she's, he'll tell her he figured out the case or whatever, and she's like, oh yeah, well, how'd you do it? That kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But they're not antagonistic per se, anything like that. So
yeah. All right. So what do you do to bring life to your characters? What how do you make those two-dimensional characters three-dimensional on the paper?
Well, it's funny because it's something that I still think I'm improving on every day. I look at some of those early books and you go, wow, there's so much more I could have done with character development, just even small things. But, I think it is just the little asides into who they are, or how they think, how they interact with people. And it can be small things, but that can speak to who they are as a person. And so it's trying to remember to get those things in there as well. Because you can always do, I thought this, or he thought this, she thought this, or whatever. But when you can remember to do things with just even a subtle thing of how they dress, or some action that they do or something like that, those are kinds of things that can help build on character as well. So it's just stuff like that.
Yeah, those action items, my editors always add the action. Don't tell, show, right? As they say, right? Constantly. Yeah. And I'm sometimes get bad at that. And she's like, nope, you need to do this here and do that. And so I get a lot of red sometimes in my editing from her. So
yeah. Well, there's times, my very first editor was actually a friend of a friend, and she was not a fiction editor per se. And so I think in some ways we trained each other in some regards, and she will even admit to some of that, where it's, I didn't think to tell you this early on or whatever. And so, I could go back and do all kinds of things to improve the early books, but they're selling fine now. So why do that? But I do sometimes go, oh, I wish I would have done this, or I wish I would have thought of something, but all you can do is just keep trying to improve as you go.
Well, and it could be the evolution of the characters and stuff. I know for me, for my Private Eye Jarvis Man, I always wanted to make sure that he was kind of a screw up sometimes. He makes a lot of mistakes in his job. He's gotten better through the years. And some people say, wow, he's kind of dumb in those first books. And I kind of wrote him that way on purpose. We're not all experts at our job when we first start, right? So,
well, exactly. I've actually had some of the same critique. Some reviewers are like, he just, he's not very smart, or he gets beat up a lot or whatever. And I'm like, well, but some of the things that he was critiqued on, I'm like, yeah, maybe there is some of that, but it's like you said, he was early on, he was just doing this kind of thing. He's not going to know everything right out of the gate. And, and I've learned over the course of doing this for several years is that, what one person thinks works and is funny or is this or that, the other person's going to think is stupid or whatever. And you're never going to please everybody. And, you're going to write the story that you think works and put it out there. And then you just have to see what other people think.
Yeah. On the job training for him.
Yeah.
Your characters. Yep. They're learning as they go, and you're learning as you're writing as well. So.
Exactly. Yeah.
So do you have any advice for aspiring authors?
Well, I think
expert that you are now.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Right.
You said you're still learning today, right? Well, that's a good thing, right? You aren't perfect yet. So
no, never will be. No, I think you need to read in your genre, whatever that is. Like when I wrote Nephilim, I knew it was kind of going to be sort of this horror, supernatural mystery type of thing. And I didn't read a lot of horror and stuff, but I started reading more of that to get a feel for the genre and what made things different than mysteries and that kind of thing. So I think you need to know your genre, at least some. I mean, I think it's great. I think people can write anything they want to, but you need to kind of know the genre, know your tropes, things like that. Especially you're going to know the tropes if you're going to break the tropes because you want it to work. And I do think it's good to read some books on craft or websites on craft and those kind of things, to be aware of what you're doing, because it's like you touched on the telling, not showing. The stuff I see from new authors is constantly a telling, not showing. And it takes some time to really understand what it means to show and to show effectively. So, I mean, I do think you have to spend some time learning. You don't need to get a degree or anything, but pay attention to what's working and that kind of thing. And then honestly, the biggest thing is what Janet Ivanovich said, is writers write. And there's been a few of them. John Dunning was a local author here that I talked to, and it was like, writers write. People will all the time tell you, I've got a book in mind, da 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 da. The writer is the one who actually takes the time to sit down and type the words in the page or dictate it, whatever we do these days. But they're the ones that are actually producing the words to get the novel finished, because it's just not going to happen on its own. Again, AI, whatever, we're not there yet. You have to do the writing.
No, I mean, you can't just plug something into your brain and just download it either. So that's.
I know. I wish we could get to that point, especially when it's late at night, right? When something's in my brain, right?
Just reaching across and having to write that on that piece of paper. It'd be so much easier wirelessly or something, just to have it all throw out on the internet and stuff. Yeah. So I don't think you do a lot of events, do you? Do you do a lot of book selling events and out and about? And I know you did Readers Take Denver, which
I really don't. Just because, I mean, honestly, it just comes down to where best to use my resources, and I do better. Most people are reading ebooks these days or audiobooks, so it makes the most sense to be there. I have a children's series, and I keep thinking that one, I think you need to try to go to libraries and stuff, but there's just too many other things to do. So I generally don't do events, here and there.
Occasional things.
Yeah.
And people can find you on your website, which I will throw up here. And I think you give away some free books for signing up for your newsletter, if I remember right.
Yep. If you go to the website, you can get a couple of ebooks for free for signing up to the newsletter, and you can unsubscribe at any time. And then, I'm on exclusively on Amazon at this point. So if you go to Amazon and search my name, everything will come up there as well.
And are your books on Kindle Unlimited as well?
Yeah, they're in Kindle Unlimited right now. With this new series, I'm toying around with selling it wide and seeing how it does elsewhere. And then I'm going to be looking at setting up a store on my website to where people can get signed books, or maybe some books with exclusive content or that kind of thing. But I'm not there yet.
Yeah. I say I do a lot of craft fairs and stuff, so that's where I sell the bulk of my paperbacks. And I do have a form that people can fill out on my website for signed books. Also, the shipping gets to be a little much sometimes after a while, though. So mail. The only good thing is that the U.S. Post Office does media mail, so it's a little bit cheaper than regular, but it's still almost like $5 a book.
Yeah,
mail something these days. So
well, if you want your book, a signed book, bad enough, they can.
Well, that's why I do a lot of craft fairs, and I do it just to get my name out there. And I don't sell the ebooks as much as you do. I actually almost sell more. I even sell paperbacks through Amazon. I sometimes get more Amazon paperback sales than I do from, which I kind of hate, because they take two cuts then.
Right.
Because, the publishing side takes a cut and then the store takes a cut. And it's actually better if I sell them direct, because I can sell it for actually even a little cheaper than on Amazon, and I make more
Right.
money.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Business side of this, there's a lot of ins and outs that people don't realize. And, I think they see that price too and think you're getting a big cut of it, and it's not what they think. But that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, well, it's the same thing with ebooks. What is it, 30%, 35% they take if it's over $2.99. If you
Right.
price it less than $2.99, they take 70%, which is just
Exactly.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
But anyway, and social media, I know you have a Facebook page.
I have a Facebook page. I'm not very active on there, but I have what I call it the Renée Pawlish Reader Society, and that's where I'm more active with readers there and post things there, and then that ties into Instagram. I used to do Twitter, or whatever it's called, X now. I don't do that, and I don't. I tried TikTok. I haven't been on there, but again, it's mostly a little bit on Facebook, and I probably need to be more active, but it's there, and my newsletter is generally where people can keep up with me. And, I'd rather be writing and letting them get content, so I spend less time on the social media.
Yeah, well, and I do Facebook, but I don't always like being on Facebook that much, and Twitter is just a cesspool these days. So, and
Yeah.
TikTok, I haven't figured out. I went to a couple of seminars of talking about using TikTok for books, and you can sell books and stuff. And I don't know, maybe it's my age, and I'm in the IT world too, but I just don't get 10-second blips on how that's going to sell
Yeah.
a lot of books. But some people, I think on the romance side, maybe it works better. The thriller side, I
Yeah.
don't know that it's, same thing
Yeah.
with movie trailers. They make these movie trailers and stuff for books, and I tried a
Yeah,
couple of those.
Yeah, that was big a long time ago, and I never saw really. They look neat, but then it's like with TikTok, you can spend all this time trying to put something out there, but if the ROI isn't there, then it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And maybe down the road with maybe Instagram something, but at the moment, and I don't truthfully like to be on camera a lot anyway, so that's the piece too. Is it's like, yeah, it's just easier for me to write. I'll send you a newsletter. We'll keep up that way.
You just talk with a book in front of your face, right? And then
Yeah, there you go.
all that. So
There you go.
okay. Well, was there anything else you wanted to talk about? I think I went through most of my question list here. Anything else you want to?
Yeah, no, we covered a lot. It's always fun to talk writing and marketing and all of that. And this is it's work, but it is a fun way to make a living, and I'm really appreciative for that and all the fans that support me in that. So it's been a good ride, and hopefully it'll continue.
Great. Well, I appreciate you having you on here.
Thank you. I
Always enjoy
appreciate it.
talking with you. It's always nice to. I'm always good one-on-one with other authors. You get in a group of people with a big crowd, it's a little different, but one-on-one always works well for me. And
Yeah.
I'm glad we were able to get you out of your shell. You said,
Yeah.
you
Right.
the introvert, as you said. So,
Yeah. No, thank you. I appreciate it. It's always fun to talk. I appreciate you having me on your show.
yep. And I'll throw you backstage here, and I'll say goodbye to everybody, and we'll hopefully chat. And I'll send you the link for the YouTube, and you definitely share with as many people as possible, and
Great.
hopefully get some books. But thanks, Renée. It was good seeing you again. Hopefully we'll run into each other again at an event or two somewhere down the line. Maybe
Yep,
Killing
sounds
Nashville
good.
in the future.
There you go. Well, thank you very much for having me.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks to everyone for listening in. For those and who will watch the recording later, I'll let you know that I'll be in Deadwood, South Dakota here in a couple of weeks for the Wild Deadwood Reads event, which we're going to double up as a vacation. And that's the next author event I'm doing, which usually is a lot of fun. Deadwood is a fun little town. It's during Wild Bill days, so it's lots of people are there. at the coming to that event, and they have lots of like dock dogs, and they have rock concerts in the main street, and they close down Main Street and all that. So it's a good little mining town, South Dakota, we like, because it's very Colorado like there in the Black Hills. But I will see everyone then. I might have another episode before I go to Deadwood. I'm not sure yet. I'll have to see about the timing, because we got to get the motorhome that in. Johnny Weber just caught the last 45 minutes. Really enjoyed. We'll have to check out Renee's books. Yeah, hi Johnny. Johnny was my guest a couple of weeks ago. So thanks, Johnny, for listening in. We will talk to everybody again, hopefully in a couple of weeks. If not, it'll be after Deadwood. It might be a month, but I've got a few more authors lined up for the future, and we hope to keep doing interviews and hopefully learning more about what everyone goes through in the author world. Thanks again, everyone. Take care.